of Orthodox spirituality.
Lord, have mercy, Lord, have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord, have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou, Lekea.
Lord have mercy, 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 Lord have mercy.
Lord have mercy, 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 Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy.
Hello, dear listeners. We are continuing to read from the book With Pain and Love for Contemporary Man, the first volume in the series Spiritual Counsels by Saint Paisios. Part 2, Modern Civilization. Civilization is a good thing, but in order for it to be beneficial, the soul must also be civilized. Chapter 1, God's Wisdom and the Environment. In wisdom hast thou made them all. Psalm 104:24. Yeroda, should we destroy the swallow nests? The swallow's droppings make the area here dirty and attract bedbugs. Well, can you create a swallow nest? Look at what God has created with just His word. What harmony, what variety. Wherever one turns, one sees His wisdom and grandeur. Look at those celestial lights, the stars. With what simplicity His divine hand has scattered them in the sky, without using a plumb line and level. They give such comfort to people, whereas man-made lights placed at regular intervals are so tiresome. With what harmony has He designed everything. The trees of a forest that are planted by man resemble an army battalion, whereas natural forests comfort the eye. They are so peaceful and restful. There are all kinds of small and big trees, each with its own unique color and savor. Even the smallest of God's wildflowers is full of grace. But look at a bunch of fake paper flowers. There is no grace in them. It's like the difference between nylon and ailon. A pun, the Greek word ailon, means immaterial. Everything that God has made is a wonder in its own right. The human body, for example, resembles a factory. God has arranged everything, the heart, the liver, the lungs, and so on, with great wisdom. Think of the wisdom with which plants are made. During the German occupation, we used to plant about 5 irrigated acres of melons. Once, I cut off the big leaves that lie near the roots to clean them up, thinking that what I was doing was the right thing. But those big leaves serve as filters. They are the plant's kidneys that absorb its bitterness. When the melons ripened, they were so bitter that our tongues were stinging for hours. Yeroda, you notice everything. We should find God in animals, in plants, in everything. How can you not admire it all? You see a tiny bird making its way to Africa and returning to find its old nest without the use of a compass. By contrast, human beings rely on all kinds of maps and road signs and still get lost. And it is not as if the birds walk on the earth and mark their routes as they go. They fly in the sky, high above the sea. There is no path for them to follow. Small birds ride on storks like airplanes, to travel by airplane to their destination. During their journey over the sea, they land occasionally to rest on an island and then continue their journey. Once, when I was at the Kalivy of Timios Stavros, Holy Cross, I saw a flock of birds coming from the east that looked like sparrows, except that they were bigger and prettier. 4 or 5 birds from the flock seemed to be tired and unable to go. At that point, about 15 other birds broke off and joined them. The rest kept on flying, and then they all stopped and rested on a tree. After a while, they all took off together. They climbed very high to get their bearings and find their flock again. What impressed me was that those 4 or 5 tired birds were not left alone, but were joined by another 15, which had broken off from their formation to keep them company. Everything that God has created is so beautiful. Have you seen how beautiful and yet varied are the colors of kittens' fur coats? We humans should be jealous. Not even queens have such beautiful coats. Wherever you turn, you encounter God's wisdom. In the old days, when everything was natural, how beautiful it all was. You see, when the rooster crows, it's not because it is telling the weather. It first sits on one leg, then when that gets numb, it crows cockatoo. It switches legs, and when that leg gets numb, it starts crowing again. And you know, it does that at fixed intervals, at 12, at 3, and at 6 o'clock in the morning, every 3 hours. It does not have a clock or battery. It does not need winding. Everything that you observe or hear in this world, you should use to reach up to heaven. Let everything transport you on high. This is how one raises himself from creatures to the Creator. Americans went to the moon, and at least they placed a sign up there that says, "The heavens declare the glory of God." Psalm 19, verse 1. Russians went into space too, but they reported Gagarin as saying that he did not find God. Yuri Gagarin was a Soviet cosmonaut. He became the first man to be successfully launched into Earth orbit in 1961. How could he possibly find him, since it was his feet that were turned upward and not his arms? The elder implies that Yuri Gagarin did not believe in God, otherwise his hands in a gesture of prayer would have been raised toward God. But actually, Gagarin did believe in God, brought top officers with him to visit monasteries, and was very upset that the Soviets attributed such a saying to him. This is why some people argue that the universe was created by nature, not by God. The whole universe? Here, when an old machine breaks down, it takes an entire group of technicians and workmen to repair it. They think and work hard, and it's only an old piece of machinery. But God moves the entire globe without electricity. The battery never runs out. The engine never quits. The earth turns, but we don't feel its speed. Amazing! If it were to suddenly turn slower, we would all be tumbling left and right. The seas have so much water, and yet the earth moves with great speed, without spilling a drop. The stars, too, with their huge mass, move with vertiginous speeds, but never collide, always keeping the same distance. And along comes a man who builds an airplane, and glows with such pride, and then, because he gets a bit taken with his own intelligence, he talks foolishly. Truly, he does not understand anything. Our modern achievements. Civilization is a good thing, but in order for it to be beneficial, the soul must also be civilized. Otherwise, we are in for a total disaster. Saint Cosmas said, Saint Cosmas Etolos, his feast is celebrated on August 24. Evil will come from those who are educated. This prophecy of St. Cosmas refers to educated people who do not have the fear of God. Despite the fact that science has advanced so much and made such tremendous progress, when it tries to help people, it often ends up harming them unintentionally. God has given man the freedom to do as he pleases, and since he does not listen to God, he ends up ruining his life. It is our own actions that cause our destruction. What have we achieved in the 20th century with our civilization? We have driven people out of their minds and have polluted the atmosphere and the environment. When a wheel leaves its axle, It spins aimlessly out of control. Similarly, when people stray from God's harmony, they suffer. In the past, people suffered from wars. Today, they suffer from civilization. Wars made them leave the cities and go to the villages, where they lived off a small field. Now, on account of civilization, they will be abandoning the cities because they can no longer live in them. In the past, wars brought death. Now it is civilization that brings diseases. Yeroda, why has the death rate from cancer gone up so much? It's the result of what happened at places like Chernobyl. This is a city in the Ukraine. It is the site of a major nuclear power plant accident on April 16, 1986. This is all man-made, and there are so many victims. Can you think of a time when so many people were sick? It was not like that in the old days. Now, all the letters I get in the mail are about cancer, or mental illness, or strokes, or broken homes. This is all I hear. In the past, cancer was rare. Back then, people led a natural life. God still allowed for illness. But that is another matter. People ate natural foods and were strong and healthy. Fruits, onions, tomatoes, they were all pure. Now, even natural foods can make people sick because everything around us is contaminated. If everything had been so contaminated in the old days, I would have died. Being a monk, I ate only what I grew in my garden, leeks, lettuce, onions, and cabbage. And yet I lived on this diet for a long time and was healthy. Today, we have fertilizers and pesticides. Look at what people eat today. This anxiety, along with the unnatural foods produced today, brings on diseases. When scientific knowledge is used indiscriminately, thousands of lives are ruined. Yeroda, how did people in the past bear the rigors of asceticism better and remain so healthy? Did their diet help? Yes, because back then food was pure. Do we need to wonder? They ate everything only when it was ripe and ready. Now they harvest fruits and vegetables before they're ripe, and to keep them from spoiling, they keep them refrigerated. Fruit is gathered while still green. It is not left to ripen on the trees. In the old days, it would get ripe on the tree. Fruit would either fall from the tree or drop in your palm the moment you touched it. But besides eating good quality, healthy foods, bread and butter and milk were very nutritious foods for children. People also used common sense and could tell if they got sick because of something they ate. Today, our food is adulterated. On top of that, people do not think, do not use common sense. Look at how many of the things that we make today are useless. We have gradually done away with wool. It's difficult to find a woolen sweater to absorb your sweat. When I put on a woolen undershirt, I can tell right away if it has synthetic material in it because my body cannot breathe. I experience discomfort and feel like I am about to suffocate. But they consider synthetic fabrics better, sturdier. This is supposed to be part of progress. But are these things really healthy? If you think of the way they manufacture them, they are actually quite unhealthy. And yet the labels will still say, pure virgin wool. And they come up with even purer words to advertise these synthetic products. Since we make wool from petroleum, we now raise sheep only for their meat. So the silkworm comes to us and says, if you want better silk, go ahead and make it yourselves. People have lost their patience. Yeroda, why are we so impatient today? The current situation does not help people to become patient. In the past, life was peaceful, and so people too were peaceful and had the endurance it takes to be patient. Today, haste has invaded the world, and we have become impatient. In the old days, people knew they could eat tomatoes by the end of June. They were not concerned. They would wait until August to eat a watermelon. They knew in what season they would eat melons or figs. But today we prefer to import tomatoes from Egypt, since they ripen earlier there, rather than eat local oranges, which are already ripe and contain the same vitamins. Try telling someone, "Come on, why don't you wait for the tomatoes to ripen and find something else to eat now?" But no, he'd rather eat tomatoes from Egypt. When people in Crete realized that, they started constructing hothouses on the island in order to grow tomatoes faster and have them available even in the winter. Now these hothouses are everywhere. We will do anything to grow all kinds of foods and have them available throughout the year so that people won't have to wait. But that is not the worst thing that has happened. There is more. Tomatoes now start out green in the evening, and by morning they are completely red and plump. I once complained to a government official about this matter. Having hothouses is one thing, but using hormones to ripen the fruit, tomatoes, and so on overnight is going too far. People who are hormone sensitive will be harmed. They have harmed the animals too. Chickens, cattle, they are all affected. They use hormones to make a 40-day-old animal look like it is 6 months old. Can anyone who eats this meat benefit from it? They give hormones to cows, and they produce more milk than the farmers can sell. As a result, the milk prices fall, and the producers go on strike and pour the milk on the streets. In the meantime, we have to drink milk with hormones. Whereas if we left everything the way God made it, things would be fine and people would have real, pure milk to drink. Notice how hormones make everything tasteless? Tasteless people, tasteless things, everything is tasteless. Even life itself has no taste. Nowadays, young people have lost their zest for life. You ask them, "What will give you peace?" "Nothing," they reply. They are young and strong, but nothing pleases them. What has happened to us? We believe that we will correct God with our inventions. We have turned night into day in order to make hens lay more eggs. And have you seen those eggs? If God had made the moon shine like the sun, people would have gone crazy. God created the night so that we may have some rest, but look at what we have come to. We have lost our peace of soul and mind. The hothouses and the use of hormones in fruits and vegetables and in animals have made people impatient. In the old days, we knew that we could reach a certain place on foot in a certain amount of time. Those with stronger legs would get there a bit sooner. Later, we invented carriages, then cars, airplanes, and so on. We try constantly to discover faster and faster means of transportation. There is even an airplane which covers the distance between France and America in 3 hours. But when someone goes from one climate to another with such great speed, it's not good for him. Even the sudden change of time itself can be confusing. Rush here, rush there. We will end up in a rocket. One press of a button, and it will be launched in space. And then it will burst open, and a madman will emerge. Where are we going? Straight to the madhouse.
For you and for many, for the remission of sins. We offer unto thee, in behalf of all and for all.
They have poisoned the air, but it is the bones of the dead that bother them. Yeroda, they are thinking of cremating the dead for sanitation purposes and for saving space. For sanitation purposes? I can't believe my ears. Aren't they ashamed to even say such a thing? They have polluted the entire atmosphere, and they worry about the bones of the dead. After all, the bones are washed. In Greece, traditionally, after several years, the dead are exhumed. The bones are washed with water and wine and prayed over, and then placed in an ossuary. And what's this idea of saving space? Greece is full of forests, and they cannot find room? A university professor came to see me, and I gave him a piece of my mind about this issue. How come they can find space for garbage, but have no room for bones, which after all are sacred? Isn't there some free space somewhere? Do they realize how many bones of saints may be among them? Are they aware of this? In Europe, they cremate the dead not because they don't have space, but because they consider it progressive. They will not cut down trees out of respect for the trees, but they will burn the dead to save space. They turn the dead into ashes and place the ashes in a tiny box for more convenience, and consider this progress. This way the nihilists get their way, which is to destroy everything, human beings included. They don't want anything that will remind people of their parents, their grandparents, or the lives of their ancestors. They want people to be completely cut off from their tradition. They want to make them forget all about the next life and tie them down to this one. But Yeroda, they say that there is a real problem in some municipalities in Athens. They have no space to bury the dead. There is so much land. Can't they spare some? There are so many public grounds outside Athens. I know many powerful people who own large areas of land out there. Can't they convert them to a cemetery? And by the way, most people who live in cities come from the provinces. After these people die, why don't they take them back to their place of birth and bury them there? The only cost would be transportation, nothing else. They should issue an order that anyone who has come to Athens recently from other parts of the country is to be buried in his place of origin. That would work much better. People that have lived in Athens for 3 generations can be buried in the city. And later, when they exhume their bones, they can dig deeper graves and place the bones there. Would that be so difficult to do? We dig deep into the earth to extract coal. We should make the same effort and excavate an underground earthwork large enough in which to place all the bones. There is no respect left. Just look at what is happening now. When parents get old, they throw them away in old age homes. In the old days, they even took care of their aged oxen. They would not slaughter them, because they thought, thanks to them, we had bread to eat. There was such respect for the dead in the old days. I remember the risks we took to bury the dead during the war. It was not only the priest, who was obliged to go anyway, who endangered his own life, but also the soldiers who had to carry the dead through the snow in freezing temperatures under enemy fire. In 1945, during the guerrilla war, before I joined the army, I used to transport the dead with the church sexton. The priest would go ahead with the censer, and we would follow. When we heard a bullet fly by, we would fall to the ground. After a while, we would get up and continue. Another bullet, and again we'd fall to the ground. I remember once during the war, when we did not have boots or had to walk barefoot in the snow. They told us if we wanted, we could remove the shoes of some soldiers who had died. Not one of us moved. But those good years are now gone. The problem is that people in high positions in government do not protest because they themselves support cremation. But the Church, since this problem has come up, must take a position and come up with a solution. Otherwise, we will be leaving spiritual things in the hands of lay people, and whatever they say will be the rule. This is impiety. How can we have God's blessing under these circumstances? What a mess. They are trying to gradually degrade man, but they will not get their way. Somehow, ample space will be found. You'll see, it will. Pollution and the destruction of the environment. It is winter, but the sun is as strong as it was on Mount Sinai because they have open holes in the atmosphere. Without the northern breeze, it's impossible to stand under the sun for long. Yeroda, what will happen with the ozone? We must show a little bit of patience while scientists go up there with 5 kilos of putty and plug the hole. Yes, let them go up and try to plug the holes. They will realize that God has made everything to be good with so much harmony. Perhaps then they will say to the Lord, "Have mercy on us. We did not do things right." Let us pray that the hole which is opened in the atmosphere will be closed. Indeed, a bowl full of the wrath of God is now open in the sky, and is causing trees and plants to wilt and dry up. But God can fix it if we ask Him, if we humbly ask Him. But some people are so cunning. In order to get money out of the very wealthy, they spread rumors that because a hole has opened in the atmosphere, the world will be destroyed. There is supposedly a scientific plan to dig deep into the earth in order to avoid the sun. Of course, since this cannot be done, they come up with a new story. Supposedly, we will build on the moon restaurants, hotels, housing, and people will go there. Those who want to be safe must make a deposit and pay the very high fare. Of course, the whole thing is a lie. There's nothing on the moon. Human beings cannot live there. Only a few astronauts went up in a capsule and came back. Yet there are people who believe this nonsense and are willing to pay big money for it. Yeroda, many people worry about air pollution. This is why they must put pressure on factory owners to install anti-pollution devices and save people from all this smog. Instead of bribing members of the parliament, factory owners should spend a little more money and install anti-pollution equipment in their factories. In the old days, there were no germs, no smog. Today, everything is polluted, and people consider it progress. Progress. And where are they heading? They are destroying human beings. You go out of your house, and the air smells of fumes. As soon as you open the window, the smog comes in and sticks to your skin. Even when you wash your hands, you cannot get rid of it, because it is not mere soot. While the sooty irritants we inhale from a fireplace are removed by coughing, coughing cannot help when it comes to smog, because smog contains oils which stick inside one's lungs. In apartment buildings, people are piled up one on top of the other, so close that when one dusts his clothes, the dust falls on the balcony below. I pity those who live on the first floor. They get the dust and garbage of all their neighbors upstairs. They get it on their clothes that are hanging out to dry or through their open windows. People have no consideration. In the old days, these modern apartment buildings would have been taken for prisons, like Yandikule. Yandikule is the Turkish name of an historical prison in the walls of Thessaloniki. Yes, it's horrible. Years ago, our houses used to have a yard, animals, a garden. On our trees, all kinds of birds would gather. Nowadays, Yeroda, you can't even see swallows. Do you think that swallows are crazy to go and live in the cities? In time, people will forget what a swallow looks like. At an American university, in the department where they study the history of the Old and New Testament, they have planted a field of wheat to show students what wheat looks like. And in order to explain to them what shepherd and you mean, they bring a small flock of sheep with a shepherd holding a shepherd's staff, and they call this a university. Dear listeners, our time is up. Thank you for listening. We will continue once again where we left off in our next show. Until then, be well.
Readings of Orthodox Spirituality.
Lord have mercy, Lord have mercy.
A wondrous journey into Orthodoxy.
Lord have mercy.
Prepared and presented by Angeliki Antonakou, Lekea.